Welcome back to Sera's Werewolf Romance collection, where the alphas are dominant and our heroines never back down from a challenge. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments, and drop a paw print emoji if your own pet is currently judging your audiobook choices. Today we have a special one. It's funny, it's tense, and it involves a fiercely stubborn antique restorer, a very grumpy werewolf cat, and an alpha king who literally bought a phone company just to get past her block list. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories exactly like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the romance burning. Now, grab your favorite drink and settle in. The alpha is calling, and our human is about to hang up. Let's read. Chapter 1. Macy Linwood blew a stray chestnut wave out of her face and wiped a smear of wood stain from her cheek. The Larkspur Shore antique shop smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Beside her workbench, her heavy-duty canvas tote rested on the floor, the handle of her reliable steel wrench poking out of the main pocket. On the velvet chair near the window, Betsy, an Asian ash-colored cat with a serious attitude problem, swatted a dust mote. Betsy gave a sassy, raspy chirp, demanding attention. The brass bell above the front door chimed. The air in the room changed the second the man stepped inside. The shift carried a distinct pressure, thick and suffocating. Macy recognized that room-silencing presence immediately. Her ex-boyfriend had carried a fraction of that energy, but this man possessed a tidal wave of it. He stood tall, with broad shoulders stretching the fabric of a tailored charcoal suit. Dark, messy hair framed a sharp jawline, and his striking amber eyes scanned the room before landing on her. He smelled like crushed pine needles and rain. He was a werewolf. An alpha, judging by the possessive way he claimed the floor space. Great. Another arrogant wolf in an expensive suit. Just what my Tuesday needed. Macy tapped a specific 3-beat rhythm on her thigh, pushing down her annoyance. She grabbed a polishing cloth and walked to the front counter. "Welcome to Linwood Restorations. How can I help you?" The man approached the counter. He moved with silent, calculated steps. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a gold-wrought ceremonial box onto the glass display case. A solid gold signet ring caught the overhead light as he pulled his hand back. "I need an appraisal on this," he said. His voice rumbled, carrying a quiet command that demanded immediate obedience. "It is a pack heirloom. I need the documentation by tonight." Macy looked at the intricate gold box, then back up to his amber eyes. She offered a polite, practiced retail smile. "It is a beautiful piece. I can have the paperwork ready for you in 3 business days." His brow furrowed. He tilted his head to the side, a gesture Macy knew wolves use to focus their hearing. He listened for her racing pulse, but Macy kept her breathing steady. "I said tonight," he repeated, pushing a fraction of that alpha command into his tone. "And I said 3 business days," Macy replied, crossing her arms. "I do not bump my current clients for walk-ins, regardless of how important you think your schedule is. Do you want me to write up the intake form, or do you want to take it somewhere else?" The alpha stared at her. He searched her face for fear or submission. When he found none, a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. The irritation in his posture vanished, replaced by genuine intrigue. "Cade Sullivan," he said, tapping the glass. "Write up the form, Macy." 3 days. He turned and walked out the door, leaving the shop feeling empty in his wake. 2 hours later, a delivery boy struggled through the front door carrying 50 red roses. Macy frowned, signing for the ridiculous bouquet. She pulled the small white card from the center of the flowers. To the woman who doesn't blink. Cade. Below the message, he had written his personal cell number. Macy rolled her eyes. The lavish display of wealth hit way too close to home. She pulled her phone from her back pocket, typed his number into her contacts, named it Do Not Answer, and hit block. She tossed the roses into the trash bin behind the counter. Betsy jumped down from her chair, sniffed the discarded flowers, and sneezed in pure disgust. Chapter 2. Sunlight hit Macy's face, waking her from a dreamless sleep. She stretched her legs and reached for the nightstand, grabbing her phone to check the time. The screen lit up, display a glaring circle with a slash through the signal bars. No service flashed in the top corner. Macy frowned. She restarted the device. The screen booted back up, but the signal remained dead. From the doorway, Betsy let out a demanding yowl. The ash-colored cat trotted into the room, her tail flicking with pure impatience. Macy sighed, tossing the blankets aside. She filled the ceramic food bowl in the kitchen, watching the feisty feline attack the kibble as if she hadn't eaten in weeks. "I have to go to the store," Macy told the cat. "Don't break anything." Macy grabbed her canvas tote, verifying her heavy steel wrench rested securely at the bottom. She locked the apartment door and jogged down the stairs to the street. Her vintage, cherry blossom pink Vespa sat parked by the curb. She strapped on her helmet, kicked the engine to life, and merged into the morning traffic of Larkspur Shore. The Apex Wireless branch occupied a corner lot 3 blocks away. When Macy pushed through the glass doors, chaos greeted her. 3 employees scrambled behind the counter, dealing with frustrated customers. Macy spotted the store manager, a balding man named Greg, wiping sweat from his forehead with a tissue. Macy bypassed the line and walked straight up to him. "Greg, my phone is a brick. What is happening?" Greg looked at her, his eyes wide and panicked. "Macy, I cannot help you. I cannot help anyone. The entire system is locked down." "Did a tower fall over?" she asked, setting her canvas tote on the counter. "Worse," Greg whispered, leaning in close. "A private holding firm bought the entire corporation overnight. We are talking an obscenely expensive acquisition. They wiped out the board of directors at 4 a.m. The new owner locked the network down for a server migration, but none of us have the bypass codes." Macy stared at him. She felt a sudden, sharp twist in her gut. She remembered the roses. She remembered the blocked number. A ridiculous suspicion formed in her mind, but she pushed it away. Nobody had that kind of money, or that level of petty vindictiveness. Before she could speak, the landline phone on the wall behind the counter began to ring. It echoed through the tense store. Greg jumped, rushing over to pull the plastic receiver from the cradle. "Apex Wireless, Larkspur Branch," Greg said, his voice trembling. He listened for 3 seconds. All the remaining color drained from his face. He lowered the phone, turning slowly to face the counter. He held the receiver out. "It is for you," Greg croaked. Macy felt her pulse spike. She marched behind the counter, snatched the plastic receiver from Greg's shaking hand, and pressed it to her ear. She did not say hello. She just waited. A familiar, rumbling voice echoed through the speaker, thick with amusement. "Try blocking me now, Macy." Chapter 3. Macy tightened her grip on the plastic receiver. The sheer audacity of the move stole the breath straight from her lungs. "You bought a telecommunications company because I threw away your flowers?" "I bought a telecommunications company because it was a solid investment," Cade corrected, his tone smooth and unbothered. "Locking your specific device out of the network was just a fringe benefit. I want a date." You need therapy, Macy shot back. I do not date men who throw ludicrous amounts of money around to force a conversation. Turn my phone back on. Have dinner with me tonight, Cade offered. I know a private place. Good food. Quiet atmosphere. No, Macy said, her voice sharp. She stared at the terrified store manager who pretended to clean a spotless display case just to avoid eye contact. I value accountability, Cade. You don't get a reward for holding my cell service hostage. A brief silence hung on the line. When Cade spoke again, the amusement faded, replaced by a competitive edge. A wager, then. Macy paused. What kind of wager? Mini-golf, Cade said. Tonight at 8. The neon course down by the pier. If you win, I sell the company back tomorrow morning and leave you alone. If I win, you cook me dinner at your place. He bought a corporate giant just to force a date. I need to win this game just to wipe that smug tone out of his voice. Fine, Macy snapped. 8 o'clock. Do not be late. She slammed the receiver down onto the cradle, ignoring the wide-eyed stares of the store employees. She grabbed her canvas tote and stormed out to her pink Vespa. The ride back to Linwood Restorations felt too short to burn off her adrenaline. She unlocked the shop doors, flipped the sign to open, and pulled her cell phone from her pocket. The signal bars jumped to full strength. He had turned her service back on. She walked behind the counter and set the phone down. A moment later, the screen lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. She tapped the speaker icon. Did you get my location pin? Cade asked. I know where the pier is, Macy said, opening a jar of wood polish. Behind her, a raspy chirp broke the quiet of the shop. Macy turned her head. Betsy, the ash-colored menace, sat perched on the highest display shelf. The cat stared directly into Macy's eyes. Slowly, deliberately, Betsy raised one paw and pressed it against a vintage ceramic vase. Betsy, do not, Macy warned, her voice dropping. The cat pushed. The vase tipped over the edge, plummeting toward the hardwood floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces with a loud, chaotic crash. Through the phone speaker, Cade let out a booming, genuine laugh. The sound filled the shop, rich and uninhibited. Macy closed her eyes, fighting the traitorous flip in her stomach. The Alpha King had a terrible sense of humor, but the sound of his laughter made her tap that 3-beat rhythm on her thigh all over again. Chapter 4. Neon Pirate Cove glowed against the dark night sky. Artificial palm trees wrapped in green fairy lights flanked the entrance, and a massive fiberglass volcano erupted with red-dyed water every 5 minutes. Macy stood near the ticket booth, holding a blue plastic putter. She wore faded jeans, a loose sweater, and her chestnut waves pulled back into a messy knot. A low, rumbling engine drowned out the pop music playing from the outdoor speakers. A midnight blue Aston Martin DB11 glided into the gravel parking lot, looking entirely out of place next to the minivans. The driver's door opened, and Cade stepped out. He wore a custom black suit, no tie, with the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He looked like a lethal predator arriving at a children's birthday party. He walked toward her, his long strides eating up the distance. Macy held out a bright yellow putter. I got you the standard size. Try not to break it. Cade took the club. His large hands swallowed the rubber grip. He tested the weight, looking at the cheap metal shaft with open disdain. I feel underdressed, he noted, gesturing to the glowing plastic skulls lining the walkway. You brought a hostile corporate takeover to a miniature golf fight, Macy said, walking toward the first hole. You deserve the yellow club. They stopped at hole 1. The objective required hitting the ball up a steep turf ramp and through the spinning blades of a pirate ship's wheel. Cade stepped up to the starting mat. He dropped his neon pink golf ball onto the turf. He adjusted his grip. He spread his feet. He looked ridiculous. I command a legion of lethal warriors, yet this brightly colored pirate ship is testing my patience. Cade glanced sideways. Macy stood a few feet away, leaning on her putter. She stared right at him. Her hazel eyes tracked his movements, sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of fear. She did not lower her gaze. She did not look away. She just watched him with a small, knowing smirk on her lips. Cade felt a strange, foreign heat rush to his ears. His heart gave a hard, frantic thump against his ribs. He lost his train of thought entirely. He looked back at the pink ball, gripped the yellow club, and swung. The putter caught the edge of the rubber mat. The club bounced over the top of the ball, hitting empty air. The pink sphere remained perfectly still. Macy let out a short, quiet snort. Cade froze, his shoulders rigid. The Alpha King of the North Ridge Pack, a man who instilled terror in rival territories, had just missed a stationary target. He turned his head, his ears burning a distinct shade of pink. "Warm-up swing," Cade stated, his voice tight. "Sure," Macy said, tapping her blue putter against her shoe. "Just try not to pull a muscle on the next one, Your Majesty." Chapter 5. Cade stared at the pink golf ball. It mocked him from the synthetic grass. He shifted his grip on the yellow putter. The rubber handle felt inadequate and fragile against his broad palms. Macy stood mere inches away, resting her weight on her blue club. A confident smirk played on her lips. "Take your time," Macy offered. "The pirate ship remains anchored." Cade squared his shoulders. He refused to let a miniature obstacle course defeat him. He locked his gaze on the target, pulled his arms back, and swung. He channeled too much power. He forgot to mask his raw strength. Crack! The thin metal shaft of the yellow putter snapped right down the middle. The force of the swing sent the club head rocketing forward. It bounced off the plastic ship hull and splashed straight into the red-dyed water of the artificial volcano. Cade stood frozen. He held a jagged, broken metal stick in his hands. Macy burst into laughter. The sound echoed through the neon-lit park, bright and unrestrained. "I misjudged the structural integrity of the equipment," Cade stated. He set the broken handle down on the turf mat. "You swung it like a medieval broadsword," Macy countered. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "You do not need to conquer the ball, Cade. You just need to guide it." She walked right up to him. Cade felt a rush of heat radiate from her skin. She reached down, retrieved another pink ball from her pocket, and set it on the mat. Then, she handed him her blue putter. "Try again," she instructed. Cade took the club. Macy stayed right beside him. She placed her hands over his, her slender fingers guiding his grip. Her touch sent a jolt of raw electricity straight down his spine. His heart began thumping with a heavy, frantic rhythm. He could hear his own pulse hammering in his ears. "She treats me like a normal man, not a king who rules an army." "Keep your shoulders relaxed," Macy murmured. Her gaze stayed focused on his hands. "This game requires finesse, not brute force." "I spent my childhood training for combat," Cade admitted. His voice dropped to a low rumble. "My instructors focused on breaking bones, not playing games on synthetic grass." Macy paused. She tilted her head, looking up at him. The neon lights cast a soft glow over her hazel eyes. She saw the truth in his statement, recognizing the burden he carried even as a boy. Her expression softened. Consider this your first lesson in having fun, Macy said. She stepped back, giving him room. Cade took a breath, adjusted his stance just as she showed him, and tapped the ball. It rolled up the ramp, slipped past the spinning wooden wheel, and dropped into the hole with a satisfying clink. Better, Macy smiled. Now go rent another club from the front desk. You owe me 18 holes. Cade walked to the ticket booth. The teenager behind the glass looked terrified when Cade requested a replacement. He handed over a green putter, refusing to charge for the broken yellow one. Cade returned to the course, determined to win the wager. They moved through the remaining holes. Cade struggled with the delicate taps required, while Macy played with practiced ease. They exchanged banter at every turn. Macy refused to let him win, and Cade found her competitive spirit intoxicating. He watched her line up a difficult shot around a windmill, admiring her focus. He had spent his life surrounded by people who yielded to his every command. Macy challenged him at every step. As they walked to the next tee, Cade pointed to the heavy-duty canvas tote she had left in her Vespa's storage compartment earlier. You carry heavy tools everywhere. Why? I restore antiques, Macy explained, lining up her next shot. Old furniture holds secrets. Sometimes, you need a steel wrench to loosen a stubborn bolt. I prefer to be prepared. Prepared for furniture or prepared for trouble? Cade asked. Macy hit the ball. It banked off a wooden bumper and rolled near the hole. Both. I have a strict rule about the company I keep. If someone brings trouble, I show them the door. Cade noted the warning in her tone. He knew she referenced her past, the ex-boyfriend who betrayed her. He vowed right then to never give her a reason to reach for that wrench. I bring a different kind of trouble, Cade said, sinking his shot. But I always pay my debts. Chapter 6. They reached the 18th hole. A towering fiberglass kraken guarded the final cup, its purple tentacles wrapped around the turf. Macy needed one solid putt to secure her victory. Pressure is on, Cade teased. He leaned against his green putter, watching her. Macy scoffed. She adjusted her grip on the blue club. I do not feel pressure, Cade. I deliver results. She swung. The blue ball rolled across the artificial grass, navigated the narrow gap between the kraken's tentacles, and dropped straight into the cup. The neon sign above the hole flashed, declaring her the winner. Macy turned to him, a triumphant smile on her face. I win. You sell Apex Wireless. Cade nodded. He accepted his defeat with grace. I yield. I will contact my brokers in the morning. The telecommunications company will go back on the market. It will yield an exorbitant payout anyway. Good, Macy said, walking toward the exit. She handed her blue club to the teenager at the front desk. Cade returned his green putter as well. They walked side by side into the gravel parking lot. The crunch of the rocks beneath their shoes filled the quiet space. The night air carried a cool breeze, rustling the artificial palm trees near the entrance. Macy felt the lingering heat from his touch on her hands. She tried to ignore the thumping rhythm in her chest, but Cade possessed an undeniable magnetic pull. Macy stopped beside her cherry blossom pink Vespa. She ran her fingers over the smooth, restored metal, steadying her nerves. Cade stood near his midnight blue Aston Martin, the sleek machine reflecting the streetlights. He leaned against the driver's side door, crossing his arms over his chest. I honored the wager, Cade stated. Now, about my prize. Macy paused, her hand resting on the leather seat of her scooter. Your prize? You lost. I agreed to sell the company if you won, Cade clarified, taking a step closer. But I never rescinded my original request. I still want that dinner date. Macy narrowed her eyes. She looked at his custom black suit, the sharp line of his jaw, and the undeniable power radiating from him. She knew the risks of letting a dominant alpha into her life. Her past taught her to build walls, to keep men like him at a safe distance. I should walk away, but refusing him feels like turning down the only challenge that matters. Fine, Macy conceded. You get your dinner date, but I dictate the terms. Name them, Cade said. His amber eyes flashed with a primal, intense focus. He looked like a hunter who had just cornered his prize, yet he waited for her permission to proceed. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, Macy instructed. My apartment. I cook. You do not bring extravagant gifts, you do not hire a private chef, and you do not try to buy my building. Cade let out a low, rumbling laugh. I accept your terms. He stepped away from the car, closing the space between them. He reached out, his large hand brushing a stray chestnut curl away from her cheek. The gesture held a surprising tenderness. I will see you tomorrow, Macy. Good, Macy said. She strapped on her helmet, concealing her hair. She climbed onto the Vespa and kicked the engine to life. Do not be late, Cade. She sped out of the parking lot, leaving him standing next to his luxury car. Cade watched the taillight of her pink scooter disappear down the street. A profound sense of anticipation settled in his chest. He had secured the date, but he knew the real challenge had just begun. He opened the door of the Aston Martin, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The powerful roar of the car matched the rising energy in his veins. He had less than 24 hours to prepare for his entry into her world. Chapter 7. Macy stood in her small kitchen, chopping fresh tomatoes on a wooden board. The apartment felt warm, the air thick with the aroma of roasted garlic. She wore a simple green sundress, her bare feet padding across the linoleum floor. The front door swung open. Tessa, Macy's younger sister, strolled inside. Smears of blue and yellow paint covered her oversized overalls. She carried a canvas under one arm and a box of brushes in the other. Something smells amazing, Tessa announced, dropping her supplies on the dining table. Are we having a feast? I am having a guest, Macy corrected, scooping the tomatoes into a hot pan. You are eating leftovers in your room. Tessa raised an eyebrow, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. A guest? Is this the billionaire who bought a phone company just to bypass your block list? He sold it this morning, Macy said, stirring the sauce. And yes, it is him. Behave yourself, Tessa. No wild questions. A raspy chirp interrupted them. Betsy, the Asian ash-colored cat, trotted into the kitchen. The feisty feline rubbed against Tessa's paint-stained legs, demanding attention. Betsy possessed wiry, patchy fur and huge golden eyes that made her look like a grumpy gremlin. Betsy hates everyone, Tessa noted, scratching the cat behind the ears. If she bites him, you have to cancel the date. A sharp knock echoed from the front door. Macy felt a sudden flutter of nerves. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the entryway. She unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Cade stood in the hallway. He wore a crisp, dark blue button-down shirt and tailored jeans, a vast departure from his formal suits. He looked rugged, relaxed, and devastatingly handsome. He held a simple bottle of red wine, adhering to her strict rule against extravagant gifts. Right on time, Macy said, stepping aside to let him in. Cade stepped over the threshold. The small apartment felt instantly crowded by his sheer size and heavy presence. He handed her the wine. I followed the rules. No private chefs. No property acquisitions. Before Macy could answer, a gray blur darted across the floor. Betsy launched herself off the back of the sofa, aiming straight for Cade's legs with extended claws. Cade moved with supernatural speed. His hand shot out, snatching the ash-colored menace midair. He held the grumpy cat at eye level. Betsy gave a loud, raspy hiss, swiping a paw at his nose. This chaotic little room feels more like a home than the massive pack estate ever did. Cade did not flinch. He used his free hand to scratch the exact sweet spot behind Betsy's oversized, bat-like ears. The cat froze. A second later, a loud, rumbling purr erupted from the feline's chest. "Traitor," Macy muttered, watching her fierce protector melt into a puddle of affection. Tessa popped her head out of the kitchen. "Wow, she usually draws blood by now. I am Tessa, the sister. Are you really a king, or is that just a corporate title?" Cade set the purring cat onto the floor. "A little of both," he answered smoothly, extending a hand to Tessa. "Cade Sullivan, it is a pleasure to meet you." During dinner, Tessa leaned across the table. "So, Cade, Macy has a strict no-losers policy. Her last boyfriend was a controlling jerk who thought he owned the sidewalk she walked on. How do you plan to be different?" Macy choked on her water. "Tessa, stop!" Cade set his fork down. He did not look offended. He looked straight at Macy, his expression serious. "I have no desire to control her path, Tessa. I have enough people reporting to me. I want a partner who challenges me, not a subject who obeys me." Macy felt a warm flush creep up her neck. He spoke the words with absolute conviction. He understood her core need for independence without her having to explain it. After Tessa retreated to her room, Macy stood at the sink, washing the dishes. Cade walked up beside her, grabbing a towel to dry the plates. His arm brushed against hers, sending a jolt of heat through her veins. He turned his body toward her, leaning in close. The tension in the air grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Macy looked up, her breath catching in her throat. His amber eyes locked onto hers, pulling her in. Chapter 8. Pack Business. Cade drove his midnight blue Aston Martin up the winding mountain roads. The Larkspur Shore city lights faded behind him, replaced by the dense, towering pines of the Northridge territory. The engine roared, a mechanical beast cutting through the dark night. He arrived at the massive stone estate that served as the pack headquarters. Armed guards bowed their heads as he walked through the grand entrance. Cade ignored the formalities, heading straight for the war room. Beta Liam waited by the long oak table. Liam wore a tactical jacket, his posture rigid and professional. Maps and encrypted tablets littered the table surface. "You are late," Liam noted, crossing his arms. "And you spent your evening in human territory." "I had a successful evening," Cade replied, taking his seat at the head of the table. He tossed his keys onto the wood. "A successful evening that cost the pack an exorbitant sum," Liam scolded, tapping a tablet screen. "Purchasing Apex Wireless drew human regulatory attention. We run a covert supernatural society, Cade. Buying major corporations to win a date is reckless." Cade let his alpha presence slip free. The air in the room grew heavy, pushed against Liam's chest. Cade did not yell, but his voice carried a dangerous, unyielding edge. "I sold the company this morning for a 10% profit. Do not question my business tactics, Liam." Liam bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the alpha command, but he kept his ground. "I question your focus. You are spending too much time in the city." Cade reached into his pocket and pulled out his solid gold signet ring. He set it on the table. He thought of Macy's hazel eyes, the way she swung that blue putter, and the fierce independence she wore like armor. She did not cower. She did not break. "She might be my mate, Liam," Cade admitted, the words echoing in the quiet room. Liam froze. The frustration drained from the beta's face, replaced by genuine shock. A mate changed everything. A Luna was the heart of the pack, essential for morale and stability. "A human?" Liam asked, his tone shifting to quiet respect. "A human who stared down an alpha command without blinking," Cade corrected. "She is stronger than half our enforcers." Before Liam could respond, a frantic knock echoed against the heavy wooden doors. A pack scout pushed into the room, breathing hard. Dirt and snow covered the scout's boots, indicating a long run from the outer borders. "Speak," Cade ordered, his demeanor shifting instantly from a man in love to a king at war. "Border patrols report movement near the southern perimeter," the scout reported, keeping his eyes lowered. "We found tracks in the mud. Several wolves. No pack scent." "I will burn this entire forest to the ground before I let a rogue get within 10 miles of her shop." "How many tracks?" Cade asked, leaning over the table to inspect the map. "At least 6 distinct sets of prints," the scout replied. "They move in a coordinated formation. This is not a random group of strays. They have a leader. They stayed just outside our scent range, using the wind to mask their approach." "Garrick," Liam muttered, speaking the name of the bitter rival who had sworn revenge on the Northridge Pack years ago. "He has been recruiting castouts from neighboring territories." Cade's jaw tightened. Garrick was a scarred, ruthless killer who understood tactical warfare. If Garrick knew about Macy, he would use her as leverage. He would target the antique shop just to draw Cade out into an ambush. "We do not wait for them to strike," Cade declared. "We fortify our positions. Liam, I want eyes on Linwood restorations. Send 2 of our best undercover operatives to watch the street." Liam nodded, typing the orders into his encrypted tablet. The pack machinery sprang into action, preparing for the inevitable clash. Cade looked at the map on the table. The rogues were probing for weaknesses, looking for a way to strike. Cade knew he had to get Macy out of the city. He needed to take her somewhere secure, away from the vulnerable storefront and the chaotic apartment. He needed to take her to the Frostvale cabin. He picked up his gold signet ring and slid it onto his finger. The game of courtship was over. The war had begun. Chapter 9. Friday morning sunlight hit the Larkspur Shore pavement. Macy steered her cherry blossom pink Vespa to the curb, killed the engine, and pulled off her helmet. She grabbed her canvas tote from the storage compartment, feeling the familiar, reassuring weight of her heavy steel wrench resting at the bottom. She unlocked the front door of Linwood Restorations. The shop smelled of lemon polish and aged wood. Before flipping the open sign, Macy walked straight to the utility closet. She retrieved a broom and a dustpan. On the hardwood floor near the front counter, the shattered pieces of the vintage ceramic vase lay untouched, exactly where Betsy the cat had knocked them down 2 days prior. Macy swept the ceramic shards into the dustpan, dumping the broken pieces into the trash bin behind the counter. She returned the broom to the closet, satisfied with the clean space. She set her canvas tote on a stool behind the register. The brass bell above the door chimed. A tall man with a red face and a tight suit stormed into the shop. Mr. Henderson. He possessed a terrible temper and a habit of demanding premium work for cheap prices. He carried a restored grandfather clock pendulum in his hands. "This bill is an outrage," Henderson barked, slapping the invoice onto the glass display case. "You charge an astronomical price tag for simple brass polishing. I refuse to pay this." Macy kept her breathing steady. She tapped a 3-beat rhythm against her thigh. "Mr. Henderson, That pendulum required 3 days of detailed chemical restoration to remove a century of rust. The price reflects the labor. The front door chimed again. Cade stepped inside. He wore a dark leather jacket over a gray t-shirt, his amber eyes scanning the room. He took one look at the red-faced customer and stopped near the doorway. He did not intervene. He crossed his arms, leaning his broad shoulders against the doorframe, watching Macy. Henderson ignored the newcomer. He leaned over the glass counter, pointing a thick finger at Macy's face. "You will cut this bill in half right now, little girl, or I will take my business elsewhere and ruin your reputation." Henderson reached across the display, attempting to snatch the restored pendulum back without paying. Macy did not flinch. She reached into her canvas tote, wrapped her fingers around the metal handle of her heavy steel wrench, and pulled it free. She brought the solid iron tool down flat against the glass counter. Clack! The sharp sound echoed through the quiet shop. Henderson froze, his hand hovering inches from the brass pendulum. "Take your hand off my counter," Macy instructed. Her voice held zero hesitation. "You will pay the invoice in full, or you will leave the pendulum. If you threaten me again, I will show you the door." Henderson stared at the heavy metal wrench. He swallowed hard. The red flush drained from his cheeks. He pulled a leather wallet from his jacket, tossed a stack of bills onto the glass, and grabbed his pendulum. He hurried out the door, avoiding Cade's gaze. Cade let out a low rumble of amusement. He pushed off the doorframe and walked toward the counter. "You handled that with impressive efficiency." "I have a strict policy about disrespectful guests," Macy replied, dropping the wrench back into her canvas tote. She counted the cash and placed it in the register. He did not try to save me. Macy realized the truth with a jolt. My ex-boyfriend would have broken that man's jaw just to prove his dominance. But Cade respected my space. He let me fight my own battle. "I came to ask you a question," Cade said, resting his hands on the glass display. "Beta Liam is increasing security at the pack borders. The city feels crowded. I want to leave town for the weekend. Just you and me. No cell service, no pack business, no distractions." Macy paused, looking into his amber eyes. "Where?" "I own a private cabin in the Frostvale Mountains," Cade offered. "It is secluded, secure. We leave tonight." Macy thought about the wager, the chaotic dinner, and the way he treated her like an equal. She nodded. "Pick me up at 6. Chapter 10. Macy stood in the center of her bedroom, staring at her open canvas tote. Friday evening shadows stretched across the apartment floor. She folded a thick wool sweater and placed it inside the bag. She grabbed a pair of hiking boots, setting them next to the clothes. She walked over to her bedside table, picking up the heavy steel wrench. Her fingers traced the cold metal. Her chest tightened. A sudden wave of panic hit her, stealing the breath from her lungs. She was agreeing to go to an isolated mountain cabin with an alpha wolf. Memories of her past rushed forward like a dark tide. Her ex-boyfriend, a minor alpha from a neighboring pack, used isolation as a weapon. He monitored her movements, questioned her choices, and restricted her access to her own friends. He disguised his control as protection. Going into the woods with a man who possessed even more power felt like walking straight into a trap. Macy dropped the wrench into the bottom of the canvas tote. Her hands shook. Tessa pushed the bedroom door open. The younger sister wore her signature paint-stained overalls, a smudge of bright blue acrylic across her cheek. Betsy, the Asian ash-colored cat, trotted into the room behind her. The feisty feline jumped onto the bed, curling into a grumpy ball next to the tote bag. "You look like you are marching to an execution, not a romantic weekend," Tessa observed. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. I am going to a secluded location with an alpha king, Macy said, her voice tight. I am ignoring every survival instinct I possess. Tessa walked over and sat on the edge of the mattress. She scratched Betsy behind the ears, triggering a loud, raspy purr from the cat. Macy, look at me. Macy forced herself to meet her sister's gaze. Cade is not your ex, Tessa stated, her tone firm. Your ex tried to bend you until you broke. Cade watched you threaten a man with a wrench today and praised you for it. He let my crazy cat use him as a heated pillow. He honors your boundaries. Macy let out a long breath. She tapped her 3-beat rhythm against her thigh. Tessa is right. Cade asked for a partner, not a prisoner. I need to trust my own judgment, or I will let my past dictate my entire future. I just hate feeling vulnerable, Macy admitted. Vulnerability is not weakness, Tessa countered. It just means you are brave enough to try again. Now, finish packing. The billionaire king is probably on his way. A deep, mechanical roar echoed from the street below the apartment window. Macy walked to the glass and looked down. The midnight blue Aston Martin DB11 idled next to the curb. The sleek car reflected the streetlights, looking predatory and beautiful in the evening gloom. Cade stepped out of the driver's side. He wore dark jeans, sturdy boots, and a thick flannel shirt. He looked up, his amber eyes finding her window with unnatural precision. He offered a small, confident nod. Macy turned away from the glass. She grabbed the handles of her canvas tote, feeling the solid weight of the wrench at the base. She zipped the bag closed. Do not let Betsy destroy the sofa while I am gone, Macy ordered, walking past her sister. I make no promises, Tessa grinned. Have fun in the woods. Macy walked down the apartment stairs, her boots echoing on the steps. She pushed through the lobby doors and stepped into the cool night air. Cade walked around the front of the luxury car, opening the passenger door for her. He took the canvas tote from her hands, his fingers brushing hers. Ready? Cade asked. Macy looked at the dark mountain peaks in the distance. She squared her shoulders. Drive. Chapter 11. The midnight blue Aston Martin tore through the winding mountain roads. Larkspur Shore became a distant cluster of lights in the rearview mirror, replaced by the towering pines of the Frostvale Mountains. The tires gripped the asphalt with perfect precision. Inside the cabin of the luxury car, silence reigned. Macy stared out the passenger window, watching the dark trees blur past. The dashboard cast a soft glow across Cade's sharp jawline. He drove with effortless skill, his large hands resting relaxed on the steering wheel. The quiet stretched between them, thick and heavy. Cade cleared his throat. The low sound vibrated in the confined space. The silence feels louder than the engine. Macy turned her head, resting her back against the leather seat. I am just thinking. Share your thoughts, Cade offered. Or we can play a game. 20 questions. You interrogate me, I interrogate you. Complete honesty required. Macy felt a genuine smile break across her face. You want to play road trip games? I want to know the woman sitting next to me, Cade replied, keeping his eyes on the road. I will go first. Why antiques? You have the skill to build modern furniture, yet you spend your days restoring discarded items. Macy considered the question. Modern furniture lacks soul. When I restore an antique, I preserve a piece of history. I take something broken and forgotten, and I give it a second chance. People discard things too easily. I prefer to fix them. Cade nodded, absorbing her answer. My turn, Macy declared. You command hundreds of wolves. You hold immense wealth and influence. What is the worst part of wearing the crown? Cade gripped the steering wheel tighter. The question hit a nerve. He stared at the dark road ahead, choosing his words. I spent years guarding my weaknesses from my enemies. Yet with her, the truth demands to be spoken. The isolation, Cade admitted, his voice dropping to a raw rumble. An alpha must project flawless strength at all times. If I show fear, the pack panics. If I show doubt, rivals challenge my borders. I spend every hour of my life being a shield for others. Nobody ever asks who protects the shield. Macy let the weight of his confession settle in the car. She saw past the imposing Alpha King and recognized the exhausted man beneath the title. She reached across the center console. She placed her hand over his, letting her fingers rest against his knuckles. Cade turned his hand over, tangling his fingers with hers. The contact sparked a rush of heat up his arm. He did not let go. "Your turn," Macy whispered. "Who broke your trust?" Cade asked, his tone shifting into something fierce and protective. "Tessa mentioned a man who tried to control you." Macy swallowed the lump in her throat. "His name was Julian, a low-ranking alpha from the eastern borders. He hated my independence. He isolated me, disguised his jealousy as pack protection, and punished me whenever I made a choice without his permission. When I finally left him, I swore I would never let another wolf dictate my life." Cade's amber eyes flashed in the dark. A low, dangerous growl vibrated in his chest. "If Julian ever steps foot in Larkspur Shore, I will tear him apart." "I do not need you to fight my ghosts, Cade." Macy squeezed his hand. "I just need you to respect my choices." "Always," Cade promised. The temperature outside plummeted. The first white flakes of snow hit the windshield, melting against the glass. The paved road turned into a dirt trail, winding deeper into the dense forest. Cade slowed the Aston Martin, navigating a sharp turn. The headlights swept across a clearing, illuminating a massive 2-story log structure. Warm light spilled from the front windows. "We are here," Cade announced, shifting the car into park. "Welcome to the Frostvale Cabin." Chapter 12. The mountain air bit at Macy's cheeks the moment she stepped out of the Aston Martin. Thick snow blanketed the ground, crunching under her hiking boots. Wind howled through the towering pines, carrying the promise of a severe winter storm. Cade pulled her canvas tote from the trunk. He walked beside her, using his broad frame to block the biting wind. They approached the front porch. To their right, a sturdy wooden woodshed stood packed with dry logs. Macy's eyes caught a glint of metal near the shed's foundation. A rusted steel pipe leaned against the wood, half buried in the snow. Her restorer's mind logged the object out of pure habit. Cade unlocked the heavy oak door and pushed it open. Macy stepped inside, brushing snow from her jacket. The cabin interior boasted rustic luxury. Vaulted ceilings showcased massive timber beams. A plush leather sofa anchored the center of the living room, resting on a thick woven rug. Cade walked over to the wall and flicked a switch. The stone gas fireplace flared to life. A steady, bright flame ignited over the artificial ceramic logs, pushing immediate heat into the freezing room. Macy walked deeper into the space. She studied the craftsmanship of the stone mantel above the fire. A bright orange flare gun rested on the rock ledge, a stark contrast to the natural tones of the cabin. "Emergency supplies," Cade noted, catching her gaze. "The weather here turns violent without warning. Cell service drops. The flare gun signals the border patrols if the roads wash out." Macy nodded. She took off her jacket and draped it over a wooden chair. Outside, the wind screamed, rattling the thick window panes. The storm intensified, dumping heavy snow against the glass. The overhead lights flickered. They hummed, dimmed, and then died completely. The cabin plunged into darkness. The only source of illumination remained the gas fireplace. The steady flame cast dancing shadows across the log walls. Macy knew the gas fixture did not burn down to embers. It provided a relentless, unchanging heat. Power grid failed, Cade stated. He set her canvas tote near the sofa. The storm knocked out the lines down the mountain. We are cut off. Macy walked toward the fireplace, sitting down on the thick, woven rug to soak in the warmth. Cade joined her. He sat close, their shoulders almost touching. Werewolves ran hot, and his body radiated a furnace-like heat that pushed the winter chill away. The storm trapped us in this room, Macy thought, staring into the bright, steady flame. But looking at him, I do not feel caged. I feel secure. Are you afraid of the dark? Cade asked, his voice a quiet rumble in the quiet room. I am an antique restorer, Macy smiled, pulling her knees to her chest. I spend half my life digging through dusty basements with a flashlight. A little darkness does not bother me. Cade reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The simple touch sent a jolt of raw electricity straight to her core. The playful banter from the car vanished, replaced by a deep, magnetic pull. I brought you here to escape the city, Cade murmured, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. I wanted to prove I could be just a man, not a king. No pack business, no distractions. Macy turned her face, leaning into his touch. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked at his lips, then back up to his eyes. The walls she built to protect herself crumbled under the weight of his genuine affection. You do not have to prove anything to me, Cade, Macy whispered. You already did. The wind raged outside, hammering the cabin with snow and ice. Inside, shielded by the steady flame and the quiet isolation, the space between them vanished. Cade leaned forward, closing the final distance. Chapter 13. The wind battered the exterior log walls of the Frostvale cabin. Inside the living room, the steady flame of the gas fireplace illuminated the space. The artificial ceramic logs never shifted, and the fire never burned down to embers. It produced a relentless, unchanging heat that pushed the winter storm away. Macy sat on the woven rug, pulling her knees to her chest. She wore her faded jeans and thick wool sweater. Cade sat mere inches away. He rested his elbows on his knees, his imposing frame blocking the draft creeping in from the frost-covered window panes. They watched the bright orange and blue flames. The blizzard outside severed their connection to the city. No pack politics hovered over Cade. No antique restoration deadlines pressured Macy. The bright orange flare gun rested on the stone mantel above the fireplace, a silent reminder of their isolation. You build strong walls, Macy, Cade observed. His voice rumbled, a low vibration that Macy felt in her own chest. You construct them with sarcasm and steel wrenches. Macy rested her chin on her knees. She kept her gaze fixed on the steady fire. Walls keep the hostile forces out. Julian taught me that lesson. He used his alpha status as a weapon. He monitored my friends. He questioned my business choices. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. I learned to strike first before anyone could lock the cage. Cade turned his head. The firelight caught the golden hue of his amber eyes. He did not offer empty apologies for her past. He leaned closer, closing the distance between them. I do not build cages, Cade stated. I command an army. I order enforcers into battle. But I want a partner, not a subject. I brought you here to show you the man beneath the crown." Macy turned to face him. The proximity sent a jolt of raw electricity down her spine. "You carry the weight of hundreds of lives, Cade. How do you survive the pressure?" "I endure," Cade answered, his tone dropping to a raw whisper. "An alpha must project flawless strength. If I show doubt, rivals challenge my borders. I spend every hour of my life acting as a shield for others. Nobody ever asks who protects the shield. The isolation eats at my bones." Macy let the truth of his confession settle in the room. She saw past the confident king and recognized the exhausted man. She reached out, placing her hand against his cheek. His skin felt like a furnace. "He holds the power to crush rivals, yet he waits for my permission just to touch my hand." Cade turned his face into her palm. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. The tension in his broad shoulders melted away. For the first time since they met, he looked at peace. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto hers. The magnetic pull between them overpowered her rational fears. "You do not have to fight alone anymore," Macy whispered. Cade reached out, his large hands framing her face. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss started slow, a gentle exploration of boundaries. Macy responded, tangling her fingers into his dark, messy hair. The connection deepened, igniting a fire in her veins that rivaled the heat of the gas fireplace. All her defenses crumbled. She surrendered to the moment, pulling him closer. Chapter 14. Cade stood up, bringing Macy with him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her feet off the rug. He carried her down the short hallway to the bedroom without breaking the kiss. The cabin remained quiet, insulated from the howling blizzard outside. He set her down beside the large oak bed, his hands resting on her hips. Moonlight filtered through the frosted glass, casting a soft, silver glow over the room. Cade stepped back, giving her space. He pulled his thick flannel shirt over his head, tossing it onto a nearby chair. Scars lined his chest and torso, souvenirs from a lifetime of defending his pack. He possessed an athletic, powerful physique, built for survival and war. Macy reached for the hem of her wool sweater. She pulled it up, but a sudden spike of panic hit her chest. She froze. Her mind flashed back to her ex-boyfriend. The demands, the expectations, the loss of control. Her hands trembled. She lowered her arms, her knuckles turning white. Cade noticed the shift in her demeanor. He stopped. He did not push forward. He took a deliberate step back, putting distance between them. "Talk to me," Cade commanded softly. His amber eyes held zero judgment, only patience. "I hate feeling vulnerable," Macy admitted, her voice shaking. "I hate losing the upper hand." "You are not losing anything, Macy," Cade reassured her. He kept his hands at his sides. "You dictate the pace. If you want me to stop, I walk out that door. You hold the power here. I yield to you." "She yields to me not out of fear, but out of trust, a gift worth a kingdom." Macy let out a breath. The panic in her chest dissolved. He was not Julian. Cade honored her boundaries. She stepped forward, closing the gap he had created. She reached out, pressing her palms flat against his scarred chest. The heat of his skin anchored her to the present. She pulled her sweater over her head, dropping it to the floor. She unbuttoned her jeans, letting them fall. Cade watched her, his eyes dark with desire and reverence. He reached out, his touch gentle as he traced the curve of her waist. They fell onto the oak bed. The romance ignited, passionate and intoxicating. Cade worshipped her skin, taking his time to map every inch of her body. He mapped her responses, learning the exact cadence of her breathing. He spoke quiet words of devotion against her neck. Macy matched his energy, pulling him down, demanding his touch. The chemistry between them felt palpable, a collision of human grit and alpha fire. She found the release she needed, the secret loneliness she carried for years vanishing under his weight. Hours later, Macy lay curled against Cade's side. His heavy arm rested across her waist, keeping her anchored. The storm outside raged, but the bedroom felt secure. Macy closed her eyes, drifting into a deep, dreamless sleep. At 3 a.m., a harsh, violent crash shattered the silence. Macy jolted awake. The sound of breaking glass echoed from the living room. Cade snapped his eyes open. His pupils dilated, the golden alpha fire flaring in the dark. A deep, guttural snarl ripped from his throat. The peace of the cabin vanished. Chapter 15. Cade sprang out of the bed. He shoved Macy behind him, putting his broad back between her and the bedroom door. The scent of shattered pine and freezing wind flooded the hallway. A hissing sound echoed from the living room. A dense, purple gas rolled across the hardwood floors, creeping under the bedroom doorframe. "Wolfsbane," Cade choked out. He clamped a hand over his nose and mouth. The toxic flower extract acted like acid in a werewolf's lungs. Cade stumbled back. His knees buckled. The poison attacked his nervous system, draining his raw strength. He hit the floor, gasping for clean air. "Cade!" Macy shouted. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her jeans from the floor and pulling them on. 6 distinct shadows moved through the living room. Heavy boots crunched over the broken window glass. The rogues had arrived. Garrick's men used the blizzard to mask their approach, deploying the toxic gas to neutralize the Alpha King. Cade looked up at Macy. His amber eyes burned with feral desperation. He could not fight them in his human form while poisoned. He needed his inner beast. He forced the shift. Macy stepped back, pressing her spine against the bedroom wall. The transformation looked excruciating. Cade threw his head back and roared in agony. His bones broke and snapped, rearranging into new shapes under his skin. His spine elongated, his jaw cracked, extending into a vicious snout. Thick, silver fur erupted across his bare skin, the brutal transformation leaving him standing completely uncovered before the beast took over. The brutal reality of the change terrified her, but she could not look away. In seconds, a giant, silver-furred wolf stood in the center of the bedroom. The beast stood as tall as a horse, radiating lethal intent. The monsters from my past always returned, but I refused to let them take him. The bedroom door exploded off its hinges. 3 rogue wolves charged into the room. They remained in their human forms, wielding iron crowbars and hunting knives. Cade lunged. He snapped his powerful jaws around the first rogue's shoulder, throwing the man against the wall. Blood splattered across the frosted glass window, but the wolfsbane gas took its toll. Cade moved sluggishly. His reflexes lagged. The second rogue slashed a hunting knife across Cade's flank. The blade bit deep into the silver fur. Cade stumbled, his paws slipping on the slick floor. He let out a pained yelp. Macy realized she had left her canvas tote in the living room. Her heavy steel wrench sat useless near the leather sofa. She stood defenseless in the corner of the bedroom. The third rogue stepped forward, raising an iron crowbar. He aimed for Cade's skull. Cade turned his massive head, baring his fangs, but his poisoned muscles refused to react in time. The rogues outmatched him. They planned to execute the Alpha King right there on the floor. Macy knew she had seconds to act before Garrick's men delivered the killing blow. Chapter 16. Macy did not scream. She did not freeze. She turned and sprinted for the bedroom window. She grabbed the latch, throwing the frosted glass pane open. The freezing blizzard whipped her face. She climbed onto the sill and dropped into the deep snow outside. The cold bit into her bare feet. She ignored the sting. She remembered the environment. She remembered the exact layout of the cabin exterior. She scrambled through the snowdrifts, rounding the corner of the log structure. She reached the wooden woodshed. The rusted steel pipe leaned against the foundation, right where she saw it hours ago. Macy grabbed the cold metal. The pipe felt heavy, solid, and perfect. I restore broken things for a living. I know exactly how to break this rogue apart. She turned and sprinted back to the open bedroom window. She pulled herself up over the sill, gripping the steel pipe tight in her right hand. Inside the bedroom, the fight turned dire. Cade lay on his side. Silver blood dripped from the knife wound on his flank. The wolfsbane gas kept him pinned to the floor. The rogue with the iron crowbar stood over the silver wolf, raising the weapon high for a fatal strike to Cade's neck. Macy rushed forward. She utilized her momentum, swinging the heavy rusted pipe with every ounce of strength she possessed. The metal connected with the rogue's skull. Crack! The sickening sound of bone giving way echoed in the room. The rogue dropped the crowbar. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed onto the floor, unconscious and bleeding. The rogue with the hunting knife spun around. He stared at the human woman holding the bloody steel pipe. He bared his teeth, his eyes flashing yellow. He took a step toward Macy. Cade forced himself up. The silver wolf snapped his jaws, clamping down on the knife-wielding rogue's ankle. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. Cade dragged him backward, keeping the threat away from Macy. More footsteps thundered in the living room. Garrick's remaining men pushed toward the hallway. Macy knew she could not fight 3 more wolves with a rusted pipe. She needed to signal the pack enforcers. She needed Betalium. Macy stepped over the unconscious rogue. She darted out of the bedroom, sprinting down the short hallway into the living room. The purple wolfsbane gas stung her eyes and burned her throat, but she held her breath. She locked her eyes on the stone mantel above the gas fireplace. The bright orange flare gun rested exactly where Cade left it. She grabbed the plastic grip. She turned toward the shattered living room window, aiming the barrel up into the dark, howling sky. She pulled the trigger. A blazing streak of red light shot out of the cabin, piercing the storm clouds and illuminating the mountain peaks. Macy lowered the gun, turning to face the hallway. She gripped the rusted steel pipe in her other hand. She stood her ground, refusing to let another monster dictate her survival. Chapter 17. The blazing red streak of the flare vanished into the storm clouds above the Frostvale Mountains. Macy stood barefoot in the freezing draft of the hallway, her chest heaving with exertion. She lowered her left arm and let the empty orange plastic gun slip from her fingers. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. She shifted her entire focus to the rusted steel pipe gripped in her right hand. The metal felt cold, unyielding, and slick with rogue blood. In the living room, the purple wolfsbane gas began to dissipate, pulled out through the shattered window by the howling blizzard. The gas fireplace continued its relentless work. The artificial ceramic logs never shifted, and the bright orange and blue flames never burned down to embers. The fixture provided a steady, unchanging heat that fought a losing battle against the winter wind tearing through the broken glass. 3 rogue wolves stepped out of the haze. They remained in their human forms, clad in torn leather jackets and heavy snow boots. They carried iron pipes and rusted hunting blades. They fanned out, their yellow eyes locked on the human woman blocking the hallway. A heavy, measured footstep echoed on the front porch. The figure did not bother using the door handle. A thick, scarred hand gripped the edge of the shattered window frame. Garrick, the rogue alpha, pulled his imposing frame into the living room. His physical anatomy spoke of a lifetime spent in brutal warfare. Corded muscles strained against a tattered black shirt. Jagged, pale scars crossed his neck and jawline, evidence of past battles for dominance. His eyes burned with a bitter, toxic yellow light. Garrick surveyed the room. He noted the steady fire, the purple gas fading into the air, and his 3 subordinates hesitating near the hallway. Then, his gaze landed on Macy. He let out a low, rasping chuckle. "A human," Garrick sneered. His voice sounded like grinding stones. "The great king of the Northridge Pack hides behind a fragile little human." Macy widened her stance. Her bare feet ached from the freezing floorboards, but she refused to step back. She tapped her thumb against the rusted steel pipe in a 3-beat rhythm, locking her hazel eyes onto the rogue alpha. "I will not become a victim again, even if I have to break every bone in my own body to defend him." "He is not hiding," Macy stated. She kept her tone even, refusing to give Garrick the satisfaction of her fear. "He is poisoned. It takes a coward to use gas instead of fighting a man face to face." Garrick dropped his twisted grin. His facial expression hardened into a mask of pure, primal rage. "I take the advantage where I find it, girl. I want his territory. I want his throne, and I want the satisfaction of ending his bloodline tonight." Behind Macy, a ragged, scraping sound echoed from the bedroom. Cade dragged his towering silver wolf body toward the doorway. The wolfsbane ravaging his nervous system kept his hind legs paralyzed. Silver blood pooled beneath his flank, staining the oak floor. He bared his fangs, snapping his powerful jaws in a desperate bid to reach the hallway, but the toxic flower extract anchored him to the ground. Garrick unholstered a long, serrated hunting knife from his belt. He took a deliberate step toward the hallway. His 3 subordinates raised their weapons, preparing to charge. Macy tightened her grip on the steel pipe. She calculated the distance, ready to swing at the first skull that came within range. She knew she could not overpower 4 wolves, but she planned to make them bleed for every inch of ground they took. Chapter 18. Garrick lunged. He moved with a burst of raw, supernatural power, closing the distance between the living room and the hallway in a heartbeat. Macy swung the rusted steel pipe with devastating force, aiming straight for the rogue alpha's temple. Garrick did not dodge. He raised his left arm, catching the heavy metal shaft with his bare hand. The impact cracked his knuckles, but he ignored the pain. He wrenched the pipe from Macy's grasp and tossed it over his shoulder. The metal clattered against the stone mantel above the gas fireplace. Before Macy could react, Garrick wrapped his massive, scarred hand around her throat. He lifted her off the floor and slammed her back against the log wall. The impact forced the breath from her lungs. Macy kicked her bare feet, her hands clawing at his iron grip. Garrick's yellow eyes bore into hers, filled with malicious triumph. From the bedroom floor, Cade watched the rogue alpha choke the life out of Macy. His amber eyes flared with unadulterated fury. He forced his front paws underneath his chest, pushing his towering silver frame upward. His muscles screamed in agony. The silver blade wound tore wider, spilling more blood across the oak boards. He managed a single, agonizing step forward before his front legs buckled, sending his snout crashing against the floorboards. "My crown means nothing if I cannot shield the woman who fights my battles." Garrick raised his serrated hunting knife, pressing the flat of the blade against Macy's cheek. "Watch her die, Your Majesty," he taunted, turning his head to look at the fallen king. "Watch me take the first piece of your kingdom." The heavy oak front door of the cabin exploded inward. The reinforced wood splintered into 1,000 jagged pieces, showering the woven rug. Beta Liam charged through the wreckage. He wore black tactical armor, his broad physique built for relentless combat. Six-pack enforcers poured into the room behind him, their faces twisted into masks of lethal intent. They tracked the red flare through the blizzard, arriving with seconds to spare. Liam bypassed the lower-ranking rogues. He locked his sights on Garrick. The beta launched himself across the living room, tackling the rogue alpha around the waist. Garrick lost his grip on Macy. She slid down the log wall, hitting the hardwood floor. She gasped, pulling freezing air into her burning lungs. She brought her hands to her bruised throat, watching the chaos erupt around her. The living room transformed into a war zone. Bone-snapping violence consumed the space. The enforcers fought with calculated, brutal precision. Fists shattered jaws, boots crushed ribs. One enforcer grabbed a rogue by the leather jacket and hurled him into the kitchen counter, shattering the wooden cabinets. Liam and Garrick tore into each other near the steady gas fireplace. Garrick slashed with his hunting knife, scoring a deep line across Liam's tactical vest. Liam ignored the attack. He delivered a crushing uppercut to Garrick's chin, snapping the rogue's head back. Liam followed with a sweeping kick, taking Garrick's legs out from under him. The rogue alpha hit the woven rug hard, dropping his blade. The cavalry had arrived, bringing the fury of the North Ridge pack with them. Chapter 19. The enforcers dominated the battlefield. Within moments, the 3 subordinate rogues lay unconscious or broken on the living room floor. Liam's tactical squad operated without hesitation, neutralizing threats with terrifying efficiency. Macy stayed pressed against the hallway wall, her breathing ragged. She watched the pack enforcers secure the perimeter, their movements synchronized and disciplined. I expected monsters to act with chaos, but Liam moves with the cold precision of a military strike. Garrick realized his coup had failed. His men were defeated, and the enforcers blocked the front door. He spat a mouthful of blood onto the woven rug. He scrambled backward, kicking the coffee table into Liam's path. Before the beta could recover, Garrick spun around and vaulted through the shattered front window, launching himself into the raging blizzard outside. "Secure the cabin!" Liam roared to his squad. The beta dove through the broken window frame, chasing the rogue alpha into the deep snow. Outside, the freezing wind masked the sound of the pursuit. Garrick pushed his corded muscles to the limit, plowing through the snowdrifts toward the tree line. Liam closed the distance. The beta launched himself forward, tackling Garrick to the frozen earth. They rolled through the snow, a tangle of limbs and snarls. Garrick thrust a hand toward Liam's throat, but the beta caught his wrist. Liam twisted the rogue's arm behind his back, forcing Garrick face first into the ice. Liam pulled a pair of heavy tactical leather gloves from his belt, sliding them over his hands before reaching into his utility pouch. He pulled out a length of thick, dull metal chains. Silver. Protected by the thick leather, Liam wrapped the silver chains around Garrick's wrists, locking the heavy clasps tight. The pure metal seared the rogue alpha's skin on contact. Garrick let out a tortured, agonizing scream. The burn neutralized his strength, reducing the imposing fighter to a trembling captive. Liam dragged Garrick to his feet, shoving the bound prisoner toward the cabin. Inside, Macy scrambled up from the floor. She ignored the pain radiating from her throat and sprinted down the hallway into the bedroom. Cade lay near the doorway. His breathing sounded shallow and wet. The towering silver wolf form shuddered violently. The shift reversed. Bones cracked and snapped back into human proportions. The silver fur receded, melting into his pale skin. Within seconds, Cade lay naked on the oak floorboards. The deep hunting knife slash on his flank looked catastrophic. Silver poison mapped a dark, twisting web of black veins across his ribs and stomach. Macy dropped to her knees beside him. She grabbed a thick wool blanket from the bed and draped it over his shivering form. She found her winter coat draped over the wooden chair. She snatched the heavy fabric, folded it into a thick square, and pressed it hard against the bleeding wound. Cade flinched. His amber eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. He let out a low groan, his hand twitching on the floorboards. "Stay with me, Cade," Macy ordered. Her voice cracked, but she maintained agonizing pressure on the wound. "You do not get to quit. Keep your eyes open." Liam rushed into the bedroom, his tactical gear dusted with snow. He took one look at the black veins spreading across his king's torso and cursed. "The silver is in his bloodstream. We need the healers." Chapter 20. Liam grabbed Cade by the shoulders. Macy kept her coat pressed tight against the flank wound, supporting Cade's waist. Together, they hauled the Alpha King off the bedroom floor. Cade's head rolled forward, his broad physique a dead weight between them. "The Aston Martin is too small," Liam stated, navigating Cade down the hallway. "Use your vehicle," Macy replied, never easing the pressure on the silver wound. They hauled Cade through the wreckage of the living room and out the broken front door. The blizzard battered them the second they stepped off the porch. An imposing black Enforcer SUV idled in the snow near the woodshed, its engine roaring over the wind. The rear doors stood open, revealing a spacious leather back seat. Liam and Macy maneuvered Cade into the vehicle, laying him across the seats. Macy scrambled in right behind him. She jammed her knees into the floorboard to brace herself, pressing her entire body weight onto the makeshift coat bandage. Cade's skin felt like ice, a terrifying contrast to the furnace-like heat he normally radiated. Liam slammed the rear door shut, plunging the back of the SUV into darkness. The beta sprinted to the driver's seat, threw the vehicle into gear, and slammed his boot onto the accelerator. The heavy tires spun, gripped the dirt road, and tore down the mountain. Inside the cabin of the speeding SUV, the heater blasted warm air, but Cade continued to shiver. His breathing turned ragged. The black veins crept higher up his ribs, inching toward his heart. "Drive faster, Liam!" Macy yelled over the engine noise. She leaned over Cade, her hazel eyes fixed on his pale face. "Listen to my voice," she demanded, tapping a frantic 3-beat rhythm against his uninjured shoulder. "You promised me a partnership. You owe me an antique shop in one piece. You do not die in the back of a truck." Cade forced his amber eyes open. The world spun in a dizzying blur of pain and shadow. He focused on the sound of her voice, the only anchor in the chaotic storm. He felt the firm, relentless pressure of her hands against his side. "Her hands are stained with my blood. Yet she anchors me to this world stronger than any pack bond." "Macy," Cade rasped, his voice barely a whisper. He managed to lift one heavy hand, wrapping his fingers around her wrist. "I am right here," she promised, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The SUV burst out of the tree line, hitting the paved highway. Liam pushed the engine to its absolute limit, the speedometer needle burying itself in the red. They tore past the city limits and crossed the Northridge borders. The pack headquarters loomed ahead, a fortress of stone and light. Liam bypassed the security gates, skidding the heavy vehicle to a halt in the central courtyard. A team of healers waited outside the medical wing, holding a steel gurney and kits packed with ancient flora and modern syringes. The rear doors tore open. The healers pulled Cade out of the SUV, transferring his towering frame onto the gurney. Macy tried to step out, her hands slick with silver blood. She wanted to follow the gurney into the sterile white halls. A massive pack enforcer stepped in front of the doors, blocking her path. "Family and pack only," the enforcer stated, his tone firm. The double doors of the medical wing slammed shut, leaving Macy standing alone in the freezing courtyard, staring at the barrier between her and the king. Chapter 21. Macy stood barefoot on the freezing cobblestones of the pack headquarters courtyard. The bitter wind bit her exposed skin, biting through the thin fabric of her wool sweater and faded jeans. Her hands and forearms bore the grim evidence of the night, thick smears of Cade's silver blood drying into dark, metallic crusts. She stared at the closed double doors of the medical wing. An imposing enforcer remained planted in front of the entrance, an immovable wall of muscle and duty. "If he dies behind those doors, I will tear this entire fortress apart with my bare hands." Beta. Liam stepped out of the courtyard shadows. He carried a pair of fleece-lined boots and a steaming ceramic mug of black tea. A jagged tear marred the dark fabric of his tactical vest where Garrick's blade had struck, exposing the thick Kevlar weave beneath. "Drink," Liam ordered. He pressed the hot mug into her stained hands. "Put the boots on. Frostbite serves no one in this pack." Macy took the tea. The heat seeped into her numb fingers, a stark contrast to the freezing mountain air. She set the mug on a stone bench, grabbed the thick boots, and shoved her freezing feet into the fleece lining. She welcomed the immediate stinging warmth. "Tell me what happens in there," Macy demanded. She kept her hazel eyes locked on the double doors. "He had black veins creeping up his ribs. His breathing sounded like grinding glass." Liam let out a breath, the puff of white vapor dissolving in the cold dawn air. "Silver acts as a profound neurotoxin to our kind. The pure metal burns the flesh on contact, but when it enters the bloodstream, it attacks the heart. The healers must purge the wound using a poultice of crushed moonseed root and yarrow. The ancient flora draws the poison to the surface. Modern stitches close the flesh, but the old medicine saves the life." Macy gripped the hot mug, feeling the ceramic burn her palms. "Will he survive the purge?" "He is the Alpha King," Liam stated, his voice a steady anchor in the chaotic morning. "He possesses resilience that defies logic. The pack needs him to survive." An hour dragged past, the sky bruised purple with the approaching morning sun. Finally, the heavy wooden doors of the medical wing swung open. A woman wearing a blood-stained white apron stepped into the courtyard. Her silver hair fell in a neat braid down her back. The head healer surveyed the area. Liam straightened his posture, stepping away from the stone wall. Macy took a step forward, her heart thumping with a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "The poison receded," the healer announced. Her tone carried the exhaustion of a grueling battle. "The poultice drew out the worst of the silver toxicity. We closed the flank wound with 80 stitches. He requires undisturbed rest." Before Liam could offer his thanks, a deafening sound erupted from inside the clinic corridor. A raw, booming roar shook the glass panes of the medical wing windows. The Alpha Command carried 0 words, projecting only pure, unfiltered dominance and a desperate, frantic demand. The imposing enforcer guarding the door flinched, dropping his chin in an instinctual show of physical submission. The head healer sighed, rubbing her temples with stained fingers. "He regained consciousness 10 seconds ago. He refuses the pain medication and demands the human woman." Macy did not wait for an invitation. She pushed past the bowing enforcer, abandoning her tea on the stone bench. She marched through the double doors, navigating the sterile white corridor of the medical wing. She reached the recovery room at the end of the hall. The heavy oak door stood ajar. Inside, Cade lay on a reinforced steel bed. Thick white bandages wrapped tight around his torso, stark against his pale skin. His amber eyes burned with a feverish, feral intensity. 2 junior healers stood near the far corner, holding metal trays of salves, clearly terrified to approach the furious king. Cade shifted his weight, wincing as the movement pulled his fresh stitches. He locked his gaze on Macy the second she crossed the threshold. The feral tension in his broad shoulders evaporated. "You are freezing," Cade grumbled. He noted her shivering frame and the dried blood coating her arms. He ignored his own catastrophic injuries. "Come here." Macy walked to the edge of the steel bed. "You possess a terrible bedside manner, Cade. You cannot roar at the people saving your life." Cade reached out, wrapping his large hand around her wrist. His skin ran hot, the familiar furnace heat returning to his veins. "I woke up in a room devoid of you. I corrected the error." Chapter 22. The morning sun broke over the Frostvale Mountains, casting long beams of light through the window of the Pack Headquarters recovery room. Cade Sullivan, Alpha King of the North Ridge Pack, proved to be the worst patient in the history of lycanthrope medicine. He refused the sterile hospital gown, opting to sit bare-chested against the pillows. The thick white bandages wrapping his ribs served as a stark reminder of the rogue ambush. He scowled at the tray of food resting on the metal bedside table. "I do not eat oat mush," Cade stated. He crossed his arms, a stubborn movement that made his sharp jaw clench in pain. Macy sat in a leather chair beside the bed. She had washed the silver blood from her hands and arms in the adjacent washroom, exchanging her ruined clothes for borrowed gray sweatpants and a clean white t-shirt. She tapped a 3-beat rhythm on her thigh, watching the imposing Alpha act like a petulant child. "It is fortified oatmeal with bone broth," Macy corrected. She grabbed the plastic spoon and held it out. "Your healers said you need the calories to regenerate the tissue the silver burned away. Eat the mush, Cade." Cade narrowed his amber eyes. He leaned forward, pushing a fraction of his heavy Alpha command into the room. "I require real food. Steak. Rare." Macy did not lower her gaze. She met his stare, her hazel eyes sparkling with unyielding amusement. "Your heavy Alpha routine holds 0 power over an antique restorer. I wrangle stubborn, broken things every single day. You are currently a broken thing. Open your mouth." She refuses to coddle my pride, treating me with an irreverence that anchors my soul to this room. Cade let out a low rumble of defeat in his chest. He hated the weakness of his injured body, but he found her unyielding grit irresistible. He took the plastic spoon from her hand and ate the fortified meal. The thick mush mirrored the taste of wet cardboard, but he swallowed it without further complaint. "Better," Macy praised, offering a genuine smile. "Now, lie back down. You tore 3 stitches roaring at the enforcer earlier. The head healer threatened to sedate you if you keep moving." "Let them try," Cade grumbled. He leaned back against the pillows. His body craved sleep, the healing process draining his vast reserves of energy. He reached out, his long fingers brushing the fabric of her borrowed shirt. "You stayed by the door." "I demand accountability," Macy whispered, resting her palm over his hand. "You promised me a partnership. You do not get to abandon the arrangement just because a rogue Alpha brought a knife to a pipe fight." A sharp knock interrupted the quiet moment. Beta Liam stepped into the recovery room. He wore a clean tactical uniform, having discarded his slashed vest. His expression looked grim, an intricate map of pack politics etched into his features. "Apologies for the intrusion," Liam said, bowing his head toward Cade. "The Pack Council convened in the main hall. The Gammas and Deltas demand an audience." Cade tightened his grip on Macy's hand. "Tell the Council their king is recovering. The meeting can wait until tomorrow." "They do not request an audience with you, Cade," Liam corrected. He shifted his gaze to Macy, his expression tight. "They request a formal meeting with the human who shattered a rogue's skull with a rusted pipe and signaled the cavalry. They want to question the woman who saved the crown." Macy felt a sudden drop in her stomach. The Pack Council, the elite ruling class of the Werewolf Society. They possessed power, influence, and centuries of archaic tradition. Cade bared his teeth. A low growl vibrated deep in his chest. "She answers to no one. Deny the request." "No," Macy interrupted. She squeezed Cade's hand, then let go. She stood up, brushing the wrinkles from her borrowed sweatpants. She remembered Julian, the ex-boyfriend who hid her away and spoke for her. She refused to hide in a hospital room while others debated her worth in the shadows. "Tell the Council I accept the invitation. I will meet them now." Cade watched her. The protective fury in his eyes melted into a profound, undeniable pride. Chapter 23. The Great Hall of the Northridge Pack echoed with the low murmurs of 50 dominant werewolves. High stone ceilings arched over rows of heavy oak benches. Ancient tapestries depicting legendary hunts lined the walls, casting long shadows in the morning light. Macy walked through the heavy wooden doors. Beta Liam escorted her down the central stone aisle. The Gammas, the war leaders and combat trainers, sat on the left benches. The Deltas, the business owners and community pillars, occupied the right. Every eye tracked her movement. The air crackled with judgment, curiosity, and predatory focus. "I will not let these arrogant wolves dictate my value or intimidate me into silence." Macy stopped at the center of the hall, standing before a raised stone dais. She wore her borrowed gray sweatpants and simple white t-shirt, lacking the armor of her usual canvas tote or heavy steel wrench. She kept her spine straight, her chin up, and her hazel eyes focused forward. An elder Gamma stood up from the front bench. He possessed a thick white beard and a chest like a wooden barrel. "You are the human, Macy Linwood." "I am," Macy answered. Her voice projected clear and steady through the cavernous room, echoing off the stone walls. "Beta Liam reports you fought Garrick's men at the Frostvale cabin," the Gamma continued. His tone dripped with open skepticism. "A human matching blows with lycanthropes. You claim you protected the Alpha King." "I claim I cracked a rogue's skull with a rusted steel pipe," Macy corrected, polite yet firm. "The pack enforcers protected the king. I merely held the line until the cavalry arrived." A murmur rippled through the Delta section. A woman with sharp cheekbones and a tailored business suit stood up. "Our king carries severe injuries today because he diverted his focus to shield you. Humans are fragile. Your presence creates a vulnerability we cannot afford. The Luna of this pack must possess the strength to survive our enemies without becoming a liability." Macy tapped her 3-beat rhythm against her thigh. She locked eyes with the female Delta, refusing to look away. "Strength takes many forms," Macy stated. "Your king possesses enough physical power to level a brick building. He does not need a partner to match his muscle. He needs a partner who refuses to run when the odds turn bleak. When Garrick deployed the toxic wolfsbane gas, your alpha fell. I did not possess claws or fangs, but I possessed grit. I stayed in the room. I fought the rogue. I signaled the perimeter patrols. Macy stepped closer to the stone dais, sweeping her gaze across the assembled council members. I am an antique restorer. I fix broken things. I do not run from damage. If you believe my humanity makes me a liability, then you misunderstand the true definition of pack loyalty. The great hall fell silent. The raw, unyielding truth of her words dismantled their archaic arguments. She demanded accountability from the elite wolves, refusing to apologize for her bloodline. The elder Gamma slowly lowered his head, a gesture of profound respect. The female Delta took her seat, her skepticism replaced by a quiet awe. Before the council could issue a formal verdict, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. A pack enforcer marched down the center aisle. He bypassed the oak benches, stopping directly beside Beta Liam. "The rogue leader is secured," the enforcer announced, his voice carrying to the high rafters. Garrick sits in the holding cells, bound in silver chains. He is conscious and prepared for the Alpha's judgment. Macy felt a chill crawl up her arms. Garrick, the bitter rival who choked her against the log wall just hours ago. A low, rhythmic sound echoed from the front corridor. Heavy boots struck the stone floor. Cade Sullivan walked into the great hall. He wore dark trousers and a loose black shirt left unbuttoned to accommodate his thick white bandages. He moved with a stiff, calculated gait, masking his agonizing pain behind a mask of pure authority. The entire council rose to their feet. Cade ignored the Gammas and Deltas. He walked straight to Macy, his amber eyes locking onto hers. "Are we finished here?" "We are," Macy nodded. Cade turned to the enforcer. "Bring the prisoner to the throne room. It is time to end this." Chapter 24. The throne room of the Northridge Pack felt cold and unforgiving. A heavy iron chair sat atop a raised platform of dark, polished stone. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering orange light over the stark architecture. Cade ascended the platform. He moved slow, the silver poison still demanding a heavy toll on his healing body. But he refused to show weakness to his subordinates. He took his seat on the Iron Throne. The Alpha King radiated an imposing, room-silencing vibe that crushed the excess air from the room. He looked down at Macy, who stood near the base of the stone steps. He extended his large hand. "Come here," Cade ordered. Macy climbed the stone steps. She ignored the stares of the pack enforcers lining the walls. She took Cade's hand, feeling the familiar, steady heat of his skin. He pulled her to his side, positioning her standing right beside the Iron Throne. He displayed her to the room not as a subject, but as a true equal. "My legacy relies not on the rogue blood I spill, but on the unwavering partner standing at my side." The heavy double doors swung open. Beta Liam entered, dragging Garrick by the silver chains binding his wrists. The rogue Alpha looked terrible. The pure metal seared his flesh, leaving dark, charred burns across his forearms. Liam forced Garrick to his knees at the base of the platform. Garrick lifted his heavy head. His toxic yellow eyes burned with bitter hatred. He looked at Cade, then shifted his gaze to Macy. A twisted, bloody grin broke across his scarred face. "You look pale, Sullivan," Garrick taunted. His voice sounded like a gravelly rasp. "The wolfsbane lingers. The silver bites deep. I took your strength. I proved you are mortal." Cade leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. His expression remained a mask of detached authority. He did not yell. He did not roar. "You proved nothing, Garrick," Cade stated. You launched a cowardly ambush with poison gas because you feared a fair fight. You targeted a human woman because you lack the courage to face an alpha. I brought war to your doorstep, Garrick spat, rattling the heavy silver chains. I am a king of the wild. You are a trespasser, Cade corrected, his voice dropping an octave. You broke pack law. You assaulted my territory. You attempted to murder the woman I claim as my own. Macy felt her heart skip a beat. The public declaration hung in the torchlight, heavy and undeniable. Garrick laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Kill me then. End the feud. Turn me into a martyr for the wild rogues. Cade leaned back in the iron chair. He observed the broken rogue with cold calculation. Death is too quick. It provides a coward's escape from accountability. I prefer true justice. Cade turned his attention to Beta Liam. Strip his rogue title. Banish him from all northern territories. Transport him to the Ironhold. A murmur rippled through the enforcers. The Ironhold served as a maximum security supernatural prison, a subterranean fortress built deep in the bedrock of the continent. It housed the worst offenders of the lycanthrope world, a place devoid of moonlight or open forests. Garrick's bloody grin vanished. True, visceral panic flashed in his yellow eyes. No, you cannot lock a wolf in a lightless stone box. Kill me! Take him, Cade ordered, dismissing the rogue with a wave of his hand. Liam hauled Garrick to his feet. The rogue alpha thrashed and cursed, fighting the burning silver chains, but the beta dragged him out of the throne room. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off Garrick's desperate shouts. Silence returned to the hall. Cade stood up from the iron throne. He winced, a sharp intake of breath escaping his lips. Macy placed her hand against his uninjured side, offering her silent support. Cade turned to the remaining pack enforcers. He pulled Macy closer, his arm wrapping around her waist. Hear me, Cade projected his voice, ensuring every wolf in the room caught his words. Macy Linwood stood her ground against a rogue alpha. She shed blood to protect this crown. From this moment forward, she carries my mark and my protection. She is your equal. Anyone who questions her authority questions mine. The enforcers dropped to one knee, bowing their heads in unison. They accepted the human. They accepted their Luna. Chapter 25. 2 days passed before the head healer cleared Cade to leave the pack headquarters medical wing. The Alpha King moved with a rigid, guarded posture, hiding the deep ache of his 80 stitches beneath a heavy wool sweater. Beta Liam drove them back to Larkspur Shore in the black Enforcer SUV, leaving the Aston Martin parked in the mountain snow until a retrieval team could fetch it. Macy sat in the passenger seat, wearing her borrowed gray sweatpants. She watched the towering pines transition into the concrete skyline of the city. The weekend had started as a quiet escape and ended in a brutal war. Now the adrenaline faded, replaced by the crushing reality of logistics. She stared at her empty hands. Her heavy steel wrench and her reliable canvas tote remained abandoned on the Frostvale cabin floor. I survived a rogue alpha, but now I have to figure out how to run an antique shop while dating a supernatural king. Drop us at the apartment, Cade instructed Liam from the back seat. He leaned against the leather upholstery, closing his amber eyes to rest his healing body. Liam navigated the city traffic and pulled the heavy SUV to a stop outside Macy's building. Her cherry blossom pink Vespa sat exactly where she left it, parked by the curb. The sight of the vintage scooter grounded her. Macy stepped out of the vehicle, Cade followed, his boots hitting the pavement with a slow, deliberate thud. He placed a hand on the small of her back, the furnace heat of his skin radiating through his wool sweater. They walked up the stairs and unlocked the apartment door. "We lived!" Tessa shouted from the kitchen. The younger sister wore her signature paint-stained overalls, holding a half-eaten bagel. "The enforcers called me on Saturday. They said you cracked a guy's skull. I am framing the incident report." A raspy chirp echoed from the living room. Betsy, the Asian ash-colored cat, trotted out to meet them. The scrappy feline zeroed in on Cade. Betsy gave a loud meow, jumped onto the sofa, and stared at the alpha king with huge golden eyes. Cade sighed, walking to the sofa. He sat down, wincing as the movement pulled his stitched flank. "I am not heated furniture." Betsy ignored the warning. The cat jumped onto his lap, curled into a tight, grumpy ball, and fell asleep instantly. Macy laughed, walking into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. She recognizes authority, or body heat. It is a toss-up. She took a sip of water, tapping her 3-beat rhythm against her thigh. "Cade, we need to talk about Linwood restorations. The pack claimed me. The enforcers expect me to live at the headquarters, but I cannot abandon my business. I will not give up my independence just to sit on an iron throne all day." Cade rested his hand on Betsy's wiry fur. He did not look angry. A sly, knowing grin touched the corners of his mouth. "I know. Julian tried to lock you in a cage. I promised I would never build one." Macy frowned, confused by his calm demeanor. "Then how do we bridge the distance?" "We don't," Cade replied, leaning his head back against the sofa cushions. "I bought the abandoned brick warehouse on the edge of the Northridge borders. It sits directly on pack territory, but it faces the main human highway. It possesses high ceilings, reinforced floors, and enough space for 10 workbenches. The deed is in your name. You run your business, you keep your independence, and you stay within the perimeter of my enforcers." Macy froze, her water glass suspended in midair. She stared at the man who had just handed her the perfect compromise. He did not dictate her path. He paved a new one right beside his own. "You bought a warehouse," Macy repeated, setting the glass down. "A whole warehouse." "It was a luxurious acquisition," Cade confirmed, his amber eyes sparkling with amusement. "And I dispatched a team to the Frostvale cabin this morning. They retrieved your canvas tote and your heavy steel wrench. The tools will meet you at the new shop." Macy walked back into the living room. She ignored the sleeping cat, leaning over the sofa to press a kiss to Cade's cheek. "You are arrogant, Sullivan." "I am efficient," Cade corrected, pulling her down to sit beside him. "And you are mine." Chapter 26. 3 months passed. The bitter winter storms yielded to the crisp, bright sun of early spring. Macy stood in the center of her new warehouse shop. The space smelled of fresh pine sawdust, lemon polish, and the faint, comforting scent of crushed pine needles and rain that lingered whenever Cade visited. She had used her final sensory limit, letting the pleasant fragrance anchor her to her new reality. She wore faded jeans and a white tank top, her chestnut waves tied back in a messy knot. Her canvas tote rested on a nearby stool, the heavy steel wrench peeking out of the front pocket. She wiped a layer of dust off a restored mahogany dining table, admiring the smooth finish. The heavy metal bay doors at the front of the shop rattled open. Cade walked inside. He no longer wore the thick white bandages. His flank wound had scarred over, leaving a thick, pale line across his ribs, but his raw strength had fully returned. He wore a fitted black t-shirt and dark jeans, carrying 2 paper cups of black coffee. "The pack accountants finalized the Apex wireless sale this morning," Cade announced, handing her a cup. "We secured a 10% profit. The corporate world remains far easier to conquer than miniature golf." Macy took the coffee, savoring the bitter taste. "You broke a plastic pirate ship, Cade. You did not conquer anything." "I conquered you," Cade countered, stepping closer. Macy set her coffee down on the mahogany table. She crossed her arms, tilting her head. "A rogue alpha tried to conquer me. You just bought me a warehouse and let my cat sleep on your face. There is a difference." From the corner of the shop, Betsy let out a raspy chirp. The Asian ash-colored cat sat perched atop a stack of wooden crates, judging them both with glowing golden eyes. "The cat is a menace," Cade noted, though his tone held zero malice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his encrypted smartphone, silencing a call from Beta Liam. The pack could wait. The rogue threats were neutralized, the borders secured, and Garrick rotted in the lightless depths of the iron hold. Cade closed the final distance between them. He wrapped his arms around Macy's waist, pulling her flush against his chest. His body radiated that familiar, unyielding heat. "Minor domestic squabble," Cade whispered, his lips hovering inches from hers. "You still have 3 boxes of clothes sitting in the trunk of the Aston Martin. Liam needs the car for a border run." "I spent my life guarding my heart, but standing here in his arms, the armor feels entirely unnecessary." "I will unpack them tonight," Macy promised, tangling her fingers into his dark, messy hair. "Unless you have a better idea for the evening." Cade's amber eyes flared with a deep golden light. He backed her up against the edge of the mahogany table, his imposing frame crowding her senses. The chemistry between them remained as volatile and electric as the night in the mountain cabin. He did not need an alpha command to make her yield. He only needed to look at her. "I have several ideas," Cade murmured, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. He leaned down and captured her lips. The kiss started slow, a deep and intoxicating promise of the night ahead. Macy kissed him back with equal fervor, matching his alpha intensity with her own human grit. She had found her equal, a king who respected her wrench, a warrior who loved her defiance, and a partner who would burn the world to keep her safe. Macy wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, ready to face whatever wild adventure the Northridge pack threw at them next. The end. Quick favor, pack. Don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Macy was fierce for putting a billionaire alpha king on Do Not Answer and swinging a steel pipe at a rogue, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is wildly unhinged.